What is an arcade? To some, it is a machine designed to allow interactive play with a specific video media, often referred to as a video game. Others may think of large rooms or even a building with bright flashes and deafening 8-bit audio. But for some like us, arcades were an escape from our day-to-day routines, a way to see our imaginations brought to life or even to encourage our own creativity. It was a way to spend time with your friends or make new ones. It's where the fires of competition were first lit and then stoked in our hearts. It's where the harsh lessons of defeat and the loving embrace of triumph were made pure. It's where a mere quarter became the key to unlocking a bright new world and would double as your place in the queue. Arcades are where we grew up. Thank you for tuning in to our first quarter Munchers episode, a series focused on arcades. In this episode, Frank and I are joined by newcomers and good friends Val and Nathaniel. All four of us were fortunate enough to grow up in an era when American arcades were at their zenith. That makes us both very experienced and very old, from a certain point of view. We each take the time to express what made arcades special to us. It is our hope that if you grew up like we did, you can connect with our stories. It is also our hope that if you did not grow up during this wondrous time, that you'll be able to empathize with our experiences. Please enjoy, and I'll be back after the show. Welcome everybody to Los Peleoneros Podcast thingy. This is episode 5. I am your host today, Bobby. I have 3 guests here with me today. I'll let them introduce themselves. We'll start with one of our returning favorites, or actually our only returning guest today. If you'll please introduce yourself.
You're talking to me?
You are our single returning guest, sir.
All right, yeah. So, hey, I'm Frank. I was on the first episode talking about Silent Hill, second episode talking about Resident Evil, and 4th episode talking about Doom.
And then one of our new guests today is a good friend of ours who is highly excited about these arcades today. If you'll please introduce yourself, Mr. Munoz.
Hey, I'm Val. This is actually my first podcast I've ever done in my life. So, but go easy on me.
No, that's not. This is a trial by fire, sir.
Ah, okay. That's fine too.
And our third guest today is actually a host or a co-host, I'm not sure. We haven't clarified that, of his own podcast, and he's joining us today because even though his joy of gaming is limited, well, how would you describe it? Your joy of gaming?
I don't take any joy in gaming or anything else in life, really. But hi, I'm Nathaniel, co-host of the Pretendium Compendium, and these guys were nice enough to have me on today.
Well, thank you all for joining us today. We are talking arcades today, something that we have been waiting for a while, something we have enjoyed all our lives. And what we'll be doing today is asking several questions. We will be doing it round table style, one question at a time. Everyone will get an opportunity to participate and then move on from there. Do you guys have any questions for me before we get started?
Nope.
Not really.
All right.
Nope.
Let's get rolling. We'll start with our most experienced host here today. That'll be Frank. What was your first arcade experience? And if you would please share a favorite arcade memory.
Okay. So, my earliest arcade memory that I can remember, if I can answer out of order, if you don't mind, is, and maybe I'm crazy because not a lot of other people remember, but at one point, I swear to God, El Paso had a Shakey's restaurant. Shakey is famous for pizza and fried chicken. And I swear to God, we had a Shakey's in the 80s.
That can't be true.
You're going to have to research this.
Shaky 80s.
I've even looked it up. I found it on Facebook for Lost El Paso, and a single post just says, anybody remember Shakey's? And that's it. And it's just a stock photo of Shakey's. Anyway, that's what I remember. Maybe it's, I'm confusing it with some other pizza fried chicken restaurant. But I remember going to the arcade and, being overwhelmed by this cacophony of like noises and flashes of light and, all of these graphics and demos and everything. And I want to say I was like maybe 6 or 7, and it was amazing. I do remember seeing the RoboCop arcade I remember seeing Double Dragon. I remember seeing Pac-Man, and a few other stock ones that usually that were staples back then. I think like Centipede and everything like that. So that, whether that restaurant was actually in El Paso or not, I swear to God, we had a Shakey's, and that was my first experience with an arcade.
I'm liking the fact that we're already starting this podcast with a possible fever dream memory here.
Well, I mean, that's...
No, Frank.
These memories don't have to be real. Did what?
Did Marilyn Monroe run the Shakey's?
I didn't even know who she was back then, so I can't really accurately say that she did.
Was the Shakey's directed by David Lynch?
Sure.
Okay.
And then my favorite arcade memory, it's actually kind of a collection of memories. So back in high school, there was two places that we really loved to go for arcades. There was Pistol Pete's Pizza and Peter Piper Pizza. I'd say overall, Pistol Pete's actually had better pizza and better arcades, in my opinion. But they did close sometime in the... Val, do you remember when they closed?
I don't, actually. I want to say we were in high school, so it was
like late 90s, right?
Yeah, it was like 96, 97.
Yeah, well, I want to say like maybe 98.
Probably, at the latest.
Yeah, at the latest. So, we used to go very often, usually on the weekends. We'd get pizza, and we'd just play arcades, everything from like MK3, Ultimate MK3, Street Fighter 2. Actually, at that point, it was Super Street Fighter 2, House of the Dead, just a lot of those games. And we did it so much that all of those experiences were really, really good. And since it's not one specific memory, I guess that's kind of cheating. But, Peter Piper. Oh, Peter Piper is the first time I had ever played Marvel vs. Capcom, and that was amazing because that Versus series I fell in love with X-Men vs. Street Fighter. But yeah.
Oh, now I got an honest question. When you first played Marvel vs. Capcom, did you see it first, or did you hear about it from your friends first?
I saw it first, actually, because I stumbled upon X-Men vs. Street Fighter and Aladdin's Castle and Cielo Vista Mall, like back in, I want to say 96 is when it came out. Literally, I was at the mall with my mom, and she let me go into the arcade for a little bit, and I was walking around checking out the games, and I see the arcade cabinet for X-Men vs. Street Fighter, and I was familiar with X-Men Children of the Atom, and obviously Street Fighter, and I had no idea that this crossover existed, and I was blown away because, there's like these air combos and crazy super moves, and so I knew of the Versus series by just experiencing it in the arcade, and then Marvel vs. Capcom I stumbled upon when it first came out.
Okay, cool. Now, the reason I wanted to ask that, and maybe you guys had a similar experience, but Marvel vs. Capcom 1 in particular is one of those games that it sounds like something your friends would make up. And so
you mean like El Paso having a Shakey's?
Yeah, there we go. I was told of it before I played it, and so it was just a brother or a friend or somebody going, "Yeah, man, there's this new fighting game where you can play as like Strider and Mega Man and Captain Commando and Venom." I'm like, bullshit. Yeah.
Well,
and Mr. T and R2D2 are at the arcade too.
See, Nathaniel, for me, I remember I was reading a GamePro magazine when Children of the Atom was out, and in one of the, I think it was the back where they have SWAT Pro. Remember that?
Yes.
Yeah. They showed you how to fight or play as Akuma in Children of the Atom. So right there, they kind of hinted, early on that there was going to be some kind of crossover between the two, properties. So,
franchises. Yeah.
yeah. So I kind of already saw it coming, but it was still kind of weird.
Oh. Who hasn't dreamed of Akuma fighting Omega Red?
So, we good, Frank?
Yes, I want to say I'm okay with that.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing. You guys mind if I go next then?
No, go ahead.
No, not at all.
All right. So my my earliest memory of an arcade. See, I grew up in a part of our town which is far away from real society. It's out in the rural area. And so, a whole idea of going to an arcade like Pistol Pete's or Peter Piper, or just when we used to have arcades at the malls, didn't happen to me later in life. So my favorite memory, or I'm sorry, my first experience of going to an arcade, my uncle, well, former uncle, he used to own a meat market in our area. And when I would go over to the meat market, my cousins, of course, would be there. He would have an arcade in there. And the arcade game that he had, and I know I played arcades earlier than this, but it's I don't remember those. This is the one that I remember, so it's my first experience. There was this martial arts fighting game. Usually when people think of martial arts fighting games, especially early ones from the 80s, they'll think of Karate Champ. But this one was Yi Kung Fu. And the reason it stuck with me is because unlike Karate Champ, where it's just a guy in a white suit and a guy in a red suit.
Yes. Well, isn't that technically the sequel to Karate Champ? Like the pseudo sequel?
It might be the same group. I don't know for sure. I don't know because it is a Konami game. Was Karate Champ a Konami game?
I don't know.
Let me look it up.
Yeah,
That's not the same. ER Kung Fu is not the same game from Bloodsport, is it?
No. Well, I don't think so.
I'll look that up too.
Okay.
So, let's see. So it says the protagonist is based off of Bruce Lee, of course, right? Big surprise there. Yeah, never mind. Let's just leave it at that. So the thing is, like, unlike Karate Champ, which has had just those two generic characters, the Yi Kung Fu had characters with personality. Each character had a different look. They had a different style. They had a different fighting style. I don't remember them having super moves. I don't think so. Not like Street Fighter, but they did have different fighting mechanics. And it was a 2-player game. So my cousins and I would pick our favorite characters, and then we'd go back and forth fighting. And what was nice is my uncle didn't care about us popping in quarters, so he was always getting up his quarters just to throw into the machine, so we could keep playing and be entertained. I think it kind of kept us out of the way, so that way we weren't bothering him when he was trying to, sell his meat. And keep in mind, I'm talking about a meat market.
So what you're telling us is that your uncle was a gigolo.
He worked in a meat market.
This...
I didn't specify what kind of meat he sold.
It was Bill the Butcher.
So that's probably my earliest experience that I can remember with an arcade. Is very, very good memories. But probably my favorite memory of playing in an arcade was actually. Are you okay? Was
just huffing some helium.
Understood. The was in my neighborhood. So again, no arcades, but we had a privately owned what do you call it, like a little corner store. It didn't have gasoline or anything, but it was to go buy snacks or go buy drinks, and for your parents to go buy beer and stuff like that. So in that they only had one arcade at a time, and the arcade that they introduced. The very first arcade they ever put in that store, and it's called Angie's, was Mortal Kombat 2. And,
nice.
My friends and I would go every day after school and, line up a quarter in order to play Mortal Kombat 2. And, of course, this is during the time when it had just come out, and there are all the rumors about, Sub-Zero can turn into a polar bear and eat you. And, there are all these kinds of crazy rumors about stuff you can pull off. Sonya's top would come off and stuff like that.
Even though she wasn't in Mortal Kombat 2.
Or not Sonya, it was
out just for that.
It was Melina and Kitana. Sorry, my bad. So, we would go every day, and we probably did it all. And what you talking about? What year was Mortal Kombat 2?
93.
93, 94.
Yeah, it was 93, 94, right? Okay, yeah, that sounds right. So, yeah, I was about 12 years old, so we would go every day after school and ride our bikes over and line up and stuff. And of course they had Cheetos there, and they had soda, so we buy all kinds of food. So that's why they love letting us in, because we pop all these quarters into the machine, and then we'd buy all these snacks and just play the shit out of that thing for a couple hours and then leave. And I loved it. It was great. I swear that Mortal Kombat 2 machine was there until I graduated from high school. And then the store closed down shortly thereafter and it got bought out. Like, the building's still there. Now it's some kind of furniture store. But every time I drive by it, I always think about playing Mortal Kombat 2 there with my friends. So it's interesting that my favorite memories about arcades have to do with finding these one arcade in this one place out in, nowhere, Texas, and trying to enjoy, video gaming that I didn't have access to elsewhere.
Yeah. What's funny is that there was a 7-Eleven down the street from where I used to live, probably about 1.5 miles up the road, and they had Mortal Kombat 3, the original Mortal Kombat 3, and that was the first time I had ever played it.
And this is back in the day when corner stores would have arcades in them.
Yeah, mine had Ninja Gaiden. Not the good Ninja Gaiden. The arcade Ninja Gaiden. Yeah, the terrible one.
I don't think I ever played the arcade Ninja Gaiden.
Oh, it's terrible.
And I guess
is
I
that
never
the
will.
one featured? Sorry. Is that the one featured in the hit movie The Wizard?
No, that's the Nintendo, the NES.
The
Ninja
Play
Gaiden.
Choice version.
Yeah, that's the Play Choice one. That's the good one. The original Ninja Gaiden's really slow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not a fun. Go look at a YouTube video up on it because it's not a fun game at all.
So it's like the reverse of Shinobi, where the arcade game's amazing and the home port is serviceable.
Pretty much.
Okay, so to go back to what Bobby was talking about earlier, I looked it up. Yes, Jean-Claude Van Damme and what's his name? The guy who played Ray Jackson. They did play Karate Champ, and Karate Champ influenced Yi-Ar Kung Fu because Karate Champ was developed by Technos for Data East, and then Karate Champ was Konami. Yi-Ar Kung Fu was Konami.
So you're saying we're all correct?
Yes.
Awesome.
Oh, so the question was that what game were they playing in Bloodsport? I heard if the game was based on Bloodsport. It's funny because I just watched Bloodsport last night, and yes, I can confirm they were playing Karate Champ in Bloodsport.
Yeah, that's totally what I meant.
I can confirm that movie holds up.
Oh, yeah.
The only part that doesn't hold up is the fact that Frank Dukes is a liar. That's about it.
That it's based on a real thing. And there's another podcast I listen to called How Did This Get Made? And they're talking about that movie, and and the backstory is that Frank Dukes originally worked for the CIA, and that he was just supposed to participate in the tournament and get information on all these criminal organizations, but he proved to be so good that they decided that, they're just like, wow, he actually won the tournament.
Wow.
Yeah.
Frank, put up your dukes.
Yeah.
See, I want them to do a movie on the making of Bloodsport, kind of like with the Disaster Artist. That would be amazing.
That would be amazing.
The Sport of Blood.
Actually, you should watch
Starring
the
Jay
making
Courtney.
Oh my god. Jai Courtney, isn't it?
It could be either Michael Jai White as Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Oh, that'd be perfect.
So, you made me lose my train of thought. All right, never mind.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
All right, I think we're ready for our next person. Val, would you like to keep going? Or keep us going?
Okay, so my memories. Actually, my first arcade memory or experience, I actually have no recollection of. This was told to me by my parents and my two older siblings. They swear it's true. So evidently, we went to the mall as a family. I was probably they claim I was like 3 years old, and they lost me. They had no idea where I was. They put out a bulletin to the mall for everybody to look for me. So apparently this lasted for several hours.
Wow.
And my parents, and I don't know if y'all met my mom. I think Frank's met my mom.
I met your mom.
she's a very intense woman, and she freaks out at everything. So I can't imagine how terrified she probably was during this whole ordeal. But long story short, they found me behind an arcade machine in whatever this arcade was, and they claimed because I had this obsession with arcade machines that it was just kind of natural for me to be there, but they didn't think to look for me until like the closing time in the arcade, and that I was hiding behind the machine because I didn't want to leave the arcade. So
I love how you have the same origin story as Paddington Bear.
But anyway,
oh my god!
So a memory of an arcade. The one I dug out on my head, I actually had a lot of answers for this, but I remember specifically it was the premiere of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, the first one, right? You know, with Casey Jones and Raphael's an asshole. And before the movie started, we were hanging out at Bassett Center Arcade. That's where we actually saw the movie. And we were playing the Ninja Turtles arcade machine. And this is at the height of Ninja Turtles. And I guess it was kind of the height for arcade as well. But we were playing the arcade machine, and it was so intense that the arcade token dispenser actually ran out of tokens. And we got all the way to Krang. And I remember Krang like glowing orange and blue, and when he's about to like die.
Yeah.
And we could not get more tokens to beat the game because the machine just ran out. And we even went to the arcade, the operator, whoever was working there, and he just kind of shrugged at us like, "I'm sorry, all the tokens are gone. I can't do anything." And I was so pissed that we got all the way to Krang, and we just had to stop the game. Like he killed us, and I remember the game over screen with the glowing letters and Krang laughing at us and being so pissed off that's as far as we're ever going to get in the game.
Wait, so why was Krang both laughing and pissed off?
Because I guess when Krang would kick your character, he would kind of laugh to mock you. So we, all the turtles were dead, and we couldn't jump back in the game. So he's just kind of laughing at us, and that's when the game over screen kind of just fades in.
No, but how is Krang both, laughing and pissed off? That doesn't make sense.
Oh no, I was pissed off. Krang.
I know.
Oh, that poor clerk would like having to stop you guys as you're about to beat it. He felt like the cop that had to tell the Beatles to come down off the roof.
Well, the good thing was that it was already showtime by that moment,
okay.
So we just went straight to the movie, and I forgot all about it. But
obviously not.
For the next 2 hours, I forgot about it.
Okay.
You
forgot about everything when you were under that movie spell?
Oh, that was such a great movie. Oh,
which movie again?
The original Turtles.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We just watched that a month ago before all this craziness started.
All this mutation.
This is the worst timeline.
Yeah, I actually remember like a lot of rumors about the movie from kids at school saying, "Oh man, there's a part where Splinter gets like half his face cut off, and one of the turtles is killed." And I was actually kind of distraught about it, like going into the movie thinking, "Oh my god, am I going to cry for the movie? Because I don't want to see any of that happen." And thankfully, those kids are all full of crap. So
these kids were coming up to you saying, "You're gonna love the Ninja Turtles movie. Mega Man's in it, Strider's in it, Venom is in it."
Oh man.
Yeah, I don't really have anything quite as good as you guys, but what was it? First arcade and favorite arcade experience?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
First arcade memory, which I might be entirely fabricating. I want to say that
you're at Shakey's.
Yeah, my memory is at Shakey's. It is long enough ago that this might just be a memory of a memory. I remember a plaza when I was growing up, and it had a comic shop, a Toys R Us, a Games Workshop, a White Castle, and a Chuck E. Cheese. Which, for all I know, those were actually spread out across the entire town. But in my head, they were all glommed together.
I think you forgot about the Shakies.
The Shakies? Possibly. So that was just paradise when I was a little kid, because I could buy miniatures and role-playing supplements and then go eat. So I remember Chuck E. Cheese was probably my first establishment that had arcade games in it. First pure arcade, as in there was no other service, was probably Aladdin's Castle or Aladdin's Palace. It's Palace, right?
Castle.
Castle.
Oh, it's Castle? Okay, Aladdin's Castle over at Cielo Vista Mall in El Paso. And as far as a favorite arcade memory, Val's, I think, was Ninja Turtles based. I just have a really pleasant memory of being at a Peter Piper and managing to play all the way through Turtles in Time.
Wow.
Oh, nice.
Cool.
Yeah, which was probably a real quarter eater, but I remember it was extremely vivid graphics. It looked great. It had the stupid sound bites, like the my toes, my toes. It was fun.
Pizza time.
Yeah, and the whole thing, the startup screen, they played the Pizza Power song from Ninja Turtles Coming Out of Their Shell live tour.
Oh, is that where that's from?
Yes, because the Ninja Turtles are like flocking. Like the studio album's okay, but you really need to see them live.
I've seen video. They're not even wearing shells, right?
Well, it depends on the tour, but the one you're talking about, Val, is called Coming Out of Our Shell.
Yeah.
It's called Coming All Over Our Shell. Okay.
Edits.
What kind of a podcast is this?
What are you talking about? That's going to be one of the clips I post on Twitter.
Oh my god. And this is not an early early arcade memory. This is probably one of my later days of arcades that I have a fond memory of, but we were at a putt-putt golf, my brother and I. We were at a Neo Geo cabinet, and they had the original Metal Slug. And for some reason, the cabinet was broken. So if you put in a coin, you had unlimited continues.
Nice.
Which, there's some freaks out there who can beat Metal Slug without taking a bullet. That's like the guy who can cut a bullet in half in real life. Normal mortals should be able to do that. So my brother and I just sat there for the better part of an hour, and for the price of, 50 cents US, we played through that entire game and just had an absolute blast. And it was a real last day of summer sort of.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, those are the memories.
It's cool.
Man, Metal Slug and those Neo Geo machines, they're just so beautiful.
Oh, I love them.
I invested in what's called an Omega, which is a Neo Geo MVS, the arcade cabinet, consoleized. So now I can actually take those big old MVS cards and play classic Neo Geo games authentically at home. Yep.
Pretty nice.
Well, what I actually really like about the Omega, it actually looks like an AES console. Because most of those MVS consoleized systems you see are very utilitarian looking. They're just like metal boxes with circuit boards sticking out. But this one actually looks like a real console.
Mm-hmm.
It's really cool.
It's sleek and beautiful like RoboCop.
Yes. But, not RoboCop.
Yeah. None of that stupid chin sticking out of the bottom.
Oh, man.
All right. Well, thank you, Nathaniel, for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So you guys ready for question number 2?
I guess we are.
Are you
All
ready
right,
for round 2?
Let's, Val, let's have you start us off on this one. What are your 3 favorite arcade games?
Oh, man. So I'm trying to think of the ones that I either spent the most time playing or just had the fondest memory of playing. So my first two are both fighters, or Mortal Kombat 2 and Street Fighter 2, but Champion Edition specifically. MK2, I actually, this is actually going to be one of my stories, my memories, but I'll go and tell it now. I used to, in the middle of the night, I used to go through my mom's purse and steal quarters out of her purse during the summer. And the next morning, I would walk to Pistol Pete's Pizza to play Mortal Kombat 2. If I didn't have quarters, I would go looking for aluminum cans to go put them in that machine that gives you the quarters for the cans. Because there was one like literally right next door to the Radio Shack, which was like in the same shopping center as Pistol Pete's. So I would do anything to play that game. And in fact, there was an MK2 machine at the Walmart next to Pistol Pete's. And that machine usually wasn't as busy, so I would tend to try and go play that one instead. But the problem was there was a certain time of day where the sun would shine through the windows and I couldn't see the screen. So I eventually learned the pattern of the sun to where I would show up to the machine and the sun would not be glaring onto the screen so I could play Mortal Kombat 2.
So sunlight is the eternal enemy of a gamer.
Well, the reason being because I didn't have to play anybody when I was playing at Walmart, whereas at Pistol Pete's, there was people always playing and they were always better than me. So I didn't want to pay money to lose, so I would just go play at Walmart. But I was obsessed with that game. MK or Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition was the first one I think I was well, the one I actually started getting really good at Street Fighter with, because this guy actually showed me how to play as Vega at Pistol Pete's. He actually coached me and he showed me like all the moves and like how not to cheat. And I mean, I just love that game so much.
Wait, how much older was this guy than you?
He was. I was probably.
Don't cheapen this.
I must have been like 12 or 13. I'm probably like 12. He was probably no older than like 15.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it wasn't like some creepy like uncle thing. It was just some dude who was really cool about it. And he was like, yeah, here's how you do the moves, here's how you do this.
My go home, take a bath with him.
Yeah,
he was Val's fault stuff.
He took Polaroid pictures. It was not, kid stuff.
Yeah, that's really interesting that he coached you to play Vega, Val, because that's a character that I never really thought of as much of a fan favorite. Like, people would always play like Guile and Dulcim and just screw you.
I never saw anybody play Dulcim, and I hate Dulcim.
Yeah. Oh, I hate playing against him, but Vega and Balrog were the two where it was like you had to fight them, but it was almost impossible to actually play as them.
I disagree. See, with Vega, he was fast and he could he could jump in the air and it's higher than
none of the other characters could jump.
Yeah. He had the agility that nobody else had. So
that's true. He did.
Yeah. My third choice was Shinobi.
That's a good one.
So yeah, Shinobi. I remember it was a Dairy Queen at the corner of Traywood and Yarborough. I think it's one of those steak pedos now. One of those terrible sandwich shops.
Steak pedos.
Steak.
Yeah, one of those things.
No, it's steak pedos.
Yeah.
No, that's more accurate.
Yeah.
Well, there was a Dairy Queen there before, and they had a Shinobi machine. Yeah, and I would actually just watch the track screen all the time because of where he's throwing the shurikens for the bonus stage.
In the first person.
Yeah, and there's that part where the AI like screws up, and the ninja lands in front of him, and it's the end of the track screen. Yeah. I don't know. I love that game. I love the music. I love the look of the game. It's really, really hard to play, even though the controls are super, super simple. I've never beat it, I've never beat it fairly. because I think the last stage or the last round, you can't continue even if you put quarters in the machine. So if you lose all your lives, that's it. The game's over. You have to beat it in that one shot.
Wow, I didn't
never
know
got that far.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I don't think there's. I mean, there are home console ports of it, but up until the Switch, I've never seen a really good one of it. But man, I love that game so much.
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing Shinobi in the early 90s a lot at Peter Piper pizzas.
I don't think I ever saw it there, actually. I might have, but I don't remember. I just remember specifically that one location because I played it all the time there.
I remember seeing it in a Little Caesars once, and that's my only tangible recollection.
It's the only good memory of a Little Caesars you could possibly conjure.
Man, I got a Little Caesars for dinner tonight, one of those hot and ready.
Yeah.
And it was ready. I'll give it that.
It's like, it's hot and it's ready. Is it good? It's hot and it's ready.
It might be off on a tangent, so you can feel free to cut this, but did you guys ever play those little memory machines they would have in like Little Caesars and Dairy Queens?
With the buttons, with the color buttons? Like
it was like a Simon. Yeah.
Oh, like a Simon, yeah.
Yeah, I used to play those, and I was usually competent enough that I could win a bag of breadsticks. And there was one day where I had like some beautiful mind thing going on, where for about like 12 solid minutes, I didn't screw up once. And I beat the game, essentially, which I didn't know you could do. And I got the free pizza, which was the highest prize.
Wow.
And the next time I went in, they had taken the machine out. And I'm sure that was just coincidence, but I like to picture like a Simpsons thing, like a warning went out to corporate. It's like, sir, this child just cost us $5.40. My God. Yeah.
That's very good.
Man.
Well then, Nathaniel, then, what are your 3 arcade games that you love?
My 3 would be... I guess I'll do it in order of release. Final Fight.
Oh,
great answer.
Like, I think there are probably beat 'em ups that could match it, but it's as good as any of them, and it also has originality to it. And the characters, especially the villains, were fantastic. So you had like Relento and Sodom, the football-playing samurai, whatever was going on there. So that one was fantastic. That was my ultimate beat-em-up. Then jumping ahead a bit, I mentioned the game already, but the series Metal Slug X is my favorite of that run.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, great.
That's the re-release, right, of 1?
2.
It's the update of 2.
Oh, it's updated of 2, that's right.
Yeah. And unlike I say, we kind of cheated, so to speak, to beat 1. I've never gotten very far in Metal Slug X in the arcade, only on home versions, but that was just such a blast. Like, it's so colorful, so packed with detail. It is legitimately funny in a way that most games kind of aren't. And just that very first stage when you're in the Middle Eastern markets and that badass score kicks in, it's just nothing but shredding for the first 10 minutes of the game.
Yeah.
Love that one. And my poison of choice is probably fighting games. So I didn't want to just make it like 3 fighters. Probably the one that I had the most fun in an arcade playing was Capcom versus SNK 2.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And of course, like Street Fighter 2 was like the game changer. There are others that are more technical or maybe better looking. That one was just like the perfect storm of looks good, plays well, like the characters, and really a dream come true because I love both Capcom and SNK. So this is probably the best marriage of those two they've ever had. And it also struck me as the last time, for me at least, that arcades really felt like arcades. Because that hit around late 2001.
Mm-hmm.
It's the last game I can remember that actually had crowds around it, where they would actually schedule tournaments for it and things like that. And of course, arcades stuck around forever. You can still find them plenty of places, but that was before it kind of moved into a niche market. These days, only arcade goers go to arcades. That was the last time it felt like a place where people would actually congregate. So there's probably that element adding to the memory as well. So
Very nice.
It's my 3 in a nutshell.
Those are good, man.
Thank you.
So I'm going to go next because I'm kind of going to piggyback off of, I am totally piggybacking because one of Nathaniel's favorites was actually one of mine as well. And that is Final Fight. These are in no particular order, but Final Fight was the first, at least as far as I can remember, beat 'em up that I played in an arcade. And same reasons, man. I mean, just going around and fighting the different villains that are there. And then, of course, the final bosses at the end of each stage. But I think more than anything is just being able to play with other people. Like my cousin would be there with me, or I would be there with a friend or something, because usually if I played Final Fight, it's because it was at an arcade. And if I went to an arcade, it's usually because it was for a birthday party. And so I would have other people to play with. And it was such a great experience being able to play games with other people, which is why I love other arcade beat 'em ups like The Simpsons and the Turtles arcade and the Turtles in Time arcade and the Avengers arcade. Those are all great. But Final Fight is still the best because those other ones, with the exception of probably Turtles in Time, I can't go back and play and enjoy as much as I used to. But Final Fight doesn't matter. It ages like a fine wine.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? And one thing that I didn't notice until I watched a video on the history of it, really, and I never really thought about it, but Final Fight is one of those early arcade games that, despite the amount of enemies on the screen, there's no slowdown.
Not at all.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Also, not to hijack it from you, Bobby, but one thing Final Fight reminds me of is when you go back to a good 80s action movie and it ages well, but it's also fun because of how 80s it is.
Exactly, yeah.
That's Final Fight. It's fun because it's so 1991.
Yeah, it's so stuck in its time, but it works regardless of the time you're in.
It's so Street Fighter 89.
I'm not going to split hairs. It's based on Streets of Fire, so you got that connection right there.
Actually, I've seen more online debate where people are arguing it because there's quoted and misquoted from the developers, and granted, since they're Japanese, sometimes people are saying it's taken out of context. It's implied that it is inspired by Streets of Fire, but one of the developers actually had never heard of that movie when that game came out.
Well, and then the developers, in other interviews have said, well, they watched a lot of 80s movies or action movies of that type. So, it's possible they had watched it, but obviously the game's influenced not just from that one movie, but a variety. It's just probably one of those coincidences where the coincidences themselves line up so well that's well, how can it not be? When in reality, it's just all coincidence.
Yeah.
I just like how you got to beat up a guy in a wheelchair.
Not in the whole console versions.
No, the game ruins it because it turns out he's
the Sega CD has the wheelchair.
Oh my god! Free wheelchair with every CD-ROM.
You guys have a pref?
At least they made up for it later on with Final Fight 3. At least Final Fight 3 is a good beat 'em up.
That's yeah.
Do you guys have a favorite character? Is there a character you guys always pick?
Well, Hagar for me. Hagar's always a guy pick.
Yeah.
I always was a big Cody fan. I loved Cody.
Me too.
So I'm hearing Hagar.
But you know what? But I'd say all three of them are fun to play in their own way, which is another reason that game is so good, Bobby. Is that because they are very different. I don't know. I'll play Guy sometimes because he is the fastest, or at least it feels like he's the fastest.
No, he is.
But
Yeah,
he's the
He's the
weakest.
fastest.
Yeah,
he
he
is
was-
the weakest. I mean, they're all designed that way because Hagar's the power, but he moves really slow.
He's
and he
the
can
tank.
take more hints, right? Cody's the middle guy, right? He's the average. He's the balance between the two. And guys got
Hagar
more
has the most
speed.
political clout.
You know, and Hagar was originally he was inspired or based on like Dan Severn, right?
No,
Wait,
it's
I think
Jesse
freaking
Ventura,
Jesse
wasn't
Ventura,
it? Yeah.
I think it's a mix of both of them.
Well, it could be. That's usually Jesse Ventura is the one I hear about.
Perhaps
Okay.
it was your conspiracy.
So handing the reins back to Bobby. Sorry.
Yes, sorry
This
about
Final
that.
Fight is such a good game.
Final
but-
Fight is such a great game, and I was going to say earlier we had brought up Streets of Rage. For those of you listening to podcasts, it's a damn fine movie. Check it out if you get a chance.
You mean Streets of Fire?
Streets of Fire. What I say? Streets of Rage. This is a game. Streets of Fire. Thank you. So moving on, my second game. So I do have variety here. The second game is actually Outrun, Sega's
Oh wow!
racing
Cool.
cabinet. Like,
Okay.
I primarily played the stand-up cabinet, but one of the primary reasons I loved it is it's, at least to my memory, it's one of the first games I played that had force feedback. That, you know, when you run off the side of the road or you crash, the cabinet starts shaking like crazy, and you know you lose the steering wheel and everything. It's freaking ridiculous. And I always loved arcade racing games. Like I played a lot of pole position. I played the I forget the 4x4 racing one, what it was called, and there's a couple others, but Outrun was great because you could pick your music at the beginning. It was colorful. You were driving a sports car. You had this hot blonde with you in the passenger seat, driving at high speed. You know, you had to shift. You know, you're just downshifting and upshifting one gear, but you know, it gave that, as a child, it makes you feel like more adult. Like, yeah, this must be what it's like to be a rich, cool adult.
Oh, hell yeah.
And it was just great. But I mean, visually, it's such a beautiful game. It's bright and colorful, and the artwork was amazing. The music was great. And
that pseudo 3D.
yeah,
You get to yeah.
yeah, especially when you're going through like the it's not so much a tunnel, but they would have these pillars with a top on it, and you're driving through that, and you'd have the shadowing and stuff. Oh yeah, it was great. Such a fantastic arcade. So yeah, Outrun was definitely one of my top 3. I love that one very much.
Yeah, that shaking on that steering wheel. Oof,
Yeah.
that was some rough stuff. Of course, I was also, you know, like 4'3", like 65 pounds. So
You're Charlie Brown.
this was a long time ago. Outrun isn't a game.
Okay. I'm sorry. You're not Charlie Brown.
Nah, I'm more like Pigpen.
With such pride. Like, from now on, Linus.
And my third game in the group is going back old school. Is actually Galaga.
Oh, shit.
Such, like, it doesn't matter where it is. If I walk into an arcade and I find Galaga, that's the very first game I play. When I walk in an arcade, I look for Galaga. Like, I love, you know, of course you have the whole space thing going on, and of course Star Wars and Star Trek was such a big thing for me growing up. My dad and I both love those series. And so to be able to play a space fighter, especially after watching what was it called? What I forget? The Last Starfighter. Thank you. The Last Starfighter. It was just one of those things where I remember, you know, The Last Starfighter has its own arcade in the movie, and it's just like, that's amazing, and that's, you know, it's more akin to like the Star Wars vector graphics version. But Galaga was so great because it was challenging enough where you felt like you had to fight your way through, but it was lenient enough where you could progress and feel like a sense of accomplishment on one quarter without feeling like, oh great, I'm never going to get through this. And it was just such a great experience, especially when they capture you let them capture one of your ships, and then you blow up the stupid mothership at the top, so you can have 2 ships and you have double the firepower. It's freaking incredible.
That's the only way to play it, man. Like, you have to get the double ship. That's the way to play Galaga.
Yep. Such a great game, such a great experience. And, you know, there are other space fighters similar to it, but none ever came as close to being that good.
And Galaxian was actually before Galaga, right?
Yeah, Galaxian was before it.
But Galaga was the superior.
I
by
feel
far.
it is.
I tell you, my girlfriend is a huge Galaga fan from way back in that era, and her little niece, who's like 4 or 5, I think, that's the one that she's raising her on as her gateway drug to gaming.
It's a good place to start.
Hell yeah.
So, so as far as Final Fight and then Outrun and then Galaga, when did you really experience those?
So Galaga was when I was in my youth. It was, I mean, it may have been one of the first games I played even before the Kung Fu Fighter I talked about, but it's just been a staple of gaming in my whole life. Final Fight, on the other hand, of course, I remember Final Fight. If you guys remember Boomerang's Theater, they had a great arcade there.
Oh yeah.
I never went to Boomerang growing up.
No,
See, that's
my friend told me about that, but I never played there.
Like
Where was it at?
It was next to Major Players.
Yeah, it was in the shopping center right there on Lee Trevino.
Okay.
And so that's where I got a lot of taste of different arcades, like the Final Fight, Street Fighter 2, the original Mortal Kombat, all the Turtles arcades, the Simpsons arcade, a lot of the big ones that we talked about were all there. And I mean, they had an amazing arcade there, Boomerangs, for such a cheap theater. It's such a shock when you think about it now. Because, I mean, like, we were talking about Aladdin's Castle, which is the only other arcade I went to. I know you guys talk about Pistol Pete's. I went to Pistol Pete's once in my life. And that was because my parents went to go pick something up for my aunt because she was at a birthday party from some other kid. And I'd never been there. When I walked in, I didn't want to leave. I should have did like Val did and hid behind an arcade for 7 hours. And,
learn from my ways.
Climb inside the arcade. Be the arcade.
So, yeah, I mean, Final Fight was Boomerang, and Outrun. Actually, Outrun was probably Chico's Tacos. Because we always had a couple arcades there, but that was one of them.
You know, at Chico's, they always had like the latest arcade, but it was usually just the guts. Because I remember seeing, what was it? It was like Street Fighter 3, New Generation, when it first came out, and it was like in an MK2 cabinet.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah, I know what you mean, where the front of the game will be Galaga and the sides will have the Mortal Kombat
Right.
dragon.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that stuff.
See, and it was usually the Chico's Tacos at McRae that I would go to.
Hey, and that's the one I used to go to because I used to live right by there.
Yep. So yeah, those were the days. All right, we're back. We're to you, Frank. What are your 3 arcades?
Okay, so you actually took one of mine, so I'm going to make it an honorable mention. But Galaga, for pretty much all the same reasons that you have. You know, I love that. You know, space shooter. It's not too hard. It's challenging enough. I do look for that game. And actually, if you go to modern arcades, have you guys noticed that the only real classic arcades they have now are like the dual Miss Pac-Man and Galaga?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I don't mind that. You know, at least you get some good classic arcade action there. Chronologically, I would say Double Dragon, the original Double Dragon, because I think that's the game that really made me fall in love with beat 'em ups. And then I really loved the graphics. I really love that you could use weapons and you could, you know, knock enemies into holes and off cliffs and shit like that. So
Yeah.
and that's the first beat 'em up that I actually mastered to where I can beat it on one quarter. Granted, you know, the programming on it is pretty easy, so you can just exploit the elbow punch to, you know, high heaven. But then I also learned about glitches and being able, you know, like certain areas to where, you know, you can knock them through the ground and everything like that. So Double Dragon is definitely one of my favorites. Let's see, chronologically. Next one is actually one that I don't see very often, and that's Star Wars Trilogy Arcade. Now,
that is
not the vector graphics ones.
Right.
I actually really don't like those. Those are okay, but I always found them really boring, you know, even though they had the yoke and everything. But Star Wars Trilogy Arcade, which came out, I want to say, 98, or so, and the graphics are beautiful. It had that joystick, and you got to play the original missions for, let's see, it was Yavin, Hoth, and Endor, and then there were 2 secret fights, one with Boba Fett and the other one with Darth Vader. And I just fell in love with that game because that's when I still actually enjoyed Star Wars, which I don't anymore. Star Wars has reached it's reached the Alien and Terminator curse to where now there's more bad movies than good movies, in my opinion. But I loved Star Wars back then, and that game is so fun to play. And usually when I would see it back then, it was $1, but I didn't care because playing it was just an absolute blast.
I'm with you. Those games that were worth the super price.
Yeah, like House of the Dead, the original House of the Dead. Oof.
There we go.
That's how wasn't Dragon's Lair like the first game that cost more than $1?
Oh
yes.
my god!
Well, I don't know if it was the first one, but I know it was one of.
It was one of the first, yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, you know what? And the first time I played Dragon's Lair was actually in Detour.
Yes.
The Alma Theater.
Well, they had part 2.
Or maybe it was part 2.
Yeah.
But I that game blew me away because I had never seen, the graphics like that, the full animated motion video. Like that was really amazing. And of course I sucked at it. I don't know why. You're just pushing directions, but I managed to suck at it.
Everybody sucks at that game. So it's barely a game to begin with.
It's a movie you can't finish watching.
Yeah.
So, and then going back to one of my favorite genres, fighting games, is actually SVC Chaos, SNK versus Capcom. This kind of ties into my first experience seeing a game that blew me away. Was I had already seen, the Versus series, X-Men vs. Street Fighter, Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, and Marvel vs. Capcom. But I saw it first at Sunland Park Mall at an arcade called Tilt.
Yeah.
And it was one of those really big arcades where it had like the controller on a pedestal and it had the large screen, and it was actually like a curved screen. And the graphics, even though they were outdated, because I saw Street Fighter characters drawn in SNK style, it blew me away. And I remember playing it, and the gameplay is broken, and it's actually not a very balanced fighter, but it's so fun to play. And especially that's actually kind of one of our staple games for our fighting game nights. When I first played that fighter, I fell in love. Who was I playing as? I think I picked Akuma because at the time I was, cheap. So
At the time,
so I picked Akuma, and it was that game still just I love it to death. It's just such a slugfest. It's an ugly fighter, but it's so fun to play.
yeah, it is.
Actually, and I have a funny story related to that too. So back in 2011, we went to a wedding. Like we're all in this wedding, and there was an arcade in Vegas called GameWorks, and most of the arcades weren't working very well. But there were actually, I think, 2 SVC Chaos machines, and Val and I, we got gotten one of the game cards, and we swiped it, and it gave us like 50 credits for whatever reason, and we had like a knockdown, drag-out fight for I swear, like an hour and a half, where we were just beating the crap out of each other. Do you remember that, Val?
I think I got to the point where I just said, I don't even want to play this anymore. Can we just get out of here? And we just kept going.
Because we had credits. I mean, you couldn't just let all those free credits go to waste. But I think that's definitely one of the most upset I've seen you like playing a fighter in a long time. Because who was I? I was Rio, and who were you?
Everybody else, because nobody else was working for me.
Yeah, you beat me a few times, and I was like, I'm going to go to Rio.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it was over after that.
Sorry.
Yeah.
You know what's sad is that I was just in Vegas for Evo, and GameWorks got turned into a Ross department store.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Like we don't have any. We don't have enough of those.
Especially in downtown Vegas, because I know when I'm on the strip, I want to find affordable clothing and home cookware. So yeah, I'd say those are my three. I mean, I have many more, but those three definitely stick out.
Cool. Good answers.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and move on to question number 4. Remind me, who answered our first question first?
Val did last time. Oh, wait, first question was me.
Was you,
Yeah.
right? And then Nathaniel, you started us off with this one. Okay, so Frank, what arcade cabinet would you like to buy today?
Okay, so this would be kind of cheating, but I would get a multicade 4-player like arcade cabinet so that we could play like the original Turtles, Turtles in Time, Sunset Riders, Golden Axe, let's see, X-Men, pretty much all those 4 or 4+ player arcades.
Gauntlet.
Gauntlet Legends and Gauntlet Dark Legacy. I just really want a multicade because I've got to fulfill a lifelong dream, and I bought a multicade, but it's only 2-player, so that's like dedicated to fighting games and classic 2-player beat 'em ups. But I want that 4-player, and I think I'm going to actually order that Arcade 1-Up Turtles machine just because I love that original arcade Turtles.
Yeah.
And Turtles in Time, I actually prefer the Super Nintendo port more because of the level design, not because of the gameplay.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if I could, I would definitely get that Star Wars Trilogy arcade if I could find one affordable.
Yeah.
What, is that too expensive?
Well, I mean, you can find them used anywhere between like $2,000 and $5,000, but it's always the shipping, you know, where they're like, "Hey, it's only going to cost $5,000 shipping." I mean, unless you take like a truck. And I started looking for arcade cabinets because back when we started really playing Third Strike a lot, I started looking for those cabinets, and I found a lot that were really affordable. I mean, less than $1,000, but they're all in New England and in the Northwest. So it's like, it's this local pickup only. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to drive, 21 hours so I can go pick up this one arcade cabinet.
Road trip.
Somebody's selling it in Maine. I can say that Star Wars arcade. It's going to cost a pretty penny to ship it out to you.
Look, if all of us buy our own arcades, then we can justify renting a U-Haul and driving all up there together and bring them all back down.
Well, that would be true. But I'm okay with the arcade cabinet that I have right now, so I'll live with that. Okay, so that's mine. The multicade with the 4-player controls setup.
And what about you, Val?
So I kind of had 2 different answers for this. My first answer was if it was going to be something where I could put a bunch of games in it, it would be a generic JAMA cabinet, like those big Capcom, big blue Street Fighter machines. You can just swap the board out, or a Neo Geo MVS. Just something you could easily take the board out and put something else in and play whatever you want, as long as it's JAMA compatible. Oh. If it was something more unique, I was actually I was thinking about the Afterburner cockpit. The one that John Connor plays in Terminator 2. Before the T-1000 comes after him.
Never seen it.
Well, let me tell you, just something very unique, something that you can't replicate at home.
Right.
That machine is just so cool. Like, you feel cool playing it. And my actual first choice, I bought last year. It's the Nintendo Play Choice 10. So for me, my holy grail has been attained. But if I had room for another one, it would be one of those 2.
Very nice.
That's cool.
Yeah, and I remember you talking about wanting that play choice for years.
Yeah.
I mean, for literal years.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Actually, the first time I think I wanted one was that field trip we took to where was that? Albuquerque or Tucson? I can't remember what the hell we went.
It was Albuquerque because we went up for the day.
Yeah, and we went to that game shop, and they had one of those tabletop play choice 10s. Remember those little white ones?
Yes, it was Gamers Anonymous.
Yeah, that's right. They had one there, and it was not in great shape. The monitor was kind of going out. One of the joysticks was not even working. And I asked the guy, like, "Hey, can you sell me this?" And they wouldn't sell it. Like, they were saying, "No, it's only for display." And it didn't make sense to me why they would let something just kind of fall apart if they're not going to let someone else buy it and restore it to enjoy it.
I hear you.
So I think since then I wanted one, but that was years ago, and I think I checked Craigslist and eBay like once a month until finally I got the one I have now.
Where did you get the one you have now?
So that one came from one of these arcade bars that we have around here. It's someone that serves tacos. It's
Funkmeyer's?
Funkmeyer's, thank you. Yeah. A good friend of ours, Barlow, he actually does maintenance on their machines. They pay him to go fix the machines, and he drinks a couple of beers, and that's pretty much how they pay him. But he called me, or he texted me one day saying, "Hey, they're looking to get a bunch of pinball machines in here, and they want to get rid of some of these arcades. And one of them is the Play Choice. Do you want it?" And right away, my now wife, back then was just my girlfriend. We were having dinner when he told me this, and I was like, "Hey, do you mind if we cut dinner short so we can go look at this arcade machine?" So we went, we looked at it, and I think I made the offer the next day, and yeah, it was at my house. I think the week after that.
Oh, that's nice. It's like a romantic story too.
Yeah.
And that's when Allison knew that she wanted to marry you. She's like, "This man has his priorities straight."
Yeah. That's what sold her on it.
Well, the thing is
then food.
he attained his pinnacle then, so then it was now she knew he would not pursue any other crazy things, or so she thought.
Yeah. I've already measured up for that afterburner cockpit.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is that's the next?
Yeah, the couch is gonna have to go, babe. I'm sorry.
We'll just have to sit in the afterburner machine where we're gonna watch movies.
Then you just drive it to work.
Oh man,
I have so much to say. So I thought I would just crash your party.
Whoa!
So much to say.
Here comes a new challenger.
No, I'm not going to. There's so much I want to say, but I won't.
You can't do that.
Oh my god, Gino.
Viewers at home, were you able to find Wookiee in this episode?
Oh man, Gino is the reptile of this episode.
Oh god.
Oh man.
All right, I'll go ahead and go next. All right, so like Frank, cheating a little bit. So this one's silly. I always like the idea of getting a MAME machine, because the first time I ever used MAME on a computer, I read it as mame. And so then I thought, wait a minute, that means if I get a MAME machine, I can call it a mames, and that way when my friends come in and see what I got, they'd be like, "No mames!"
And then you could say, "See mames."
Moving forward, so yeah, I mean, I do want to do something like that, like a multi-arcade like Frank has. And so he gave me the information about where he got his arcade, and then what we would need to do in order to get that up and running. But as far as pure arcades that were released, especially when we played as a kid, going back to my list of 3, I definitely want a Galaga machine. Just specifically like with the artwork and the right controls and the cover on the control panel showing the controls. And I mean, it's like I said, Galaga is just probably the one that I absolutely want. And so if I had to start with one arcade that I would get for the first time, starting on this crazy idea of having arcades in the home, not just one, but many, I would start off with Galaga. That's my one. I've already talked about why. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, here's an additional question. What style? Would you get like an upright or would you get a tabletop?
No, it'd have to be an upright. I remember playing the tabletop once, I think at like some trashy bar, and it was not comfortable. Maybe it was because of the trashy bar. Yeah, shakies. But it would definitely be the upright arcade, because again, that's, to me, arcades, that's the way they should be. They should be upright. You'd be able to stand around and look at the screen, and then you walk around to the next arcade. You're not sitting down relaxing because you're tense. You're trying to save the universe against these galactic beings, or whatever evil you're fighting. Because you got to stand in the moment like that.
You know what? That makes me think. I really need to look into Galaga lore and figure out what all that's about.
What exactly is a Galaga?
I think it's the name of the ship. I think the ship is Galaga.
Is it? Hold on. I have the internet at my fingertips.
We've been mispronouncing it. It's Galaga.
Galaga.
Yeah.
Galaga.
Galaga. Hi, Joey Galaga here.
Would you get like the double with the Miss Pac-Man or just this plain Galaga?
No, just the plain Galaga. To me, getting it with the Miss Pac-Man would actually be a step down. Not because I have anything against Miss Pac-Man, but I mean, basically what they did is they retrofitted one of the arcades and added both games in there in order to save on costs. And for me, I would want, just a standalone arcade Galaga.
Okay.
Does the Duo edition, the one with both of them, does that have the old Miss Pac-Man logo where she's looking lascivious?
Yeah, I don't remember. I think so.
I want to say it does, but I can't remember.
Where she's like laying on top of the logo, it's all like slatternly.
Yes, I think it does, where she's sitting on her logo. Yeah.
Okay. And then all the ghost monsters look like guys in their early 50s with gloves. Oh shit.
All right. Nathaniel, you're up.
Oh. Well, I just want to say I think all of you guys cheated because you picked like systems in your cabinet where you could play like 100 games.
That's not necessarily cheating.
No, I'm not saying I like you any less. I'm just saying you're all like thieves and liars. No, I kid because mine's a cheat as well. I would get an old school red cabinet Neo Geo.
Oh, very
hell
nice.
Yeah, and it would just it would have all the games, and I would play it all the time, and girls would come over, and it would just be everything I ever wanted.
It sounds like there's a lot more to that desire.
Well, one follows the other.
Oh, that's true. Yes.
Say. Just bring them in like, hey, baby, let me introduce you to Earthquake and Tam Tam.
Would you like to meet George, Lizzie, and Ralph? We got some Rampage.
Oh, now, you're probably used to that home shit. I got a werewolf for you. You're not going to be able to get him anywhere else. He wasn't in the home edition, was he?
I don't know. I never played the NES version or the Atari 2600 or whatever versions came out for it.
We had a lot of fun with that one. My lifelong love of kaiju.
Yeah, I think it was just Lizzie and George.
It was, and then... Which, that never really made sense, because they're obviously Godzilla and Kong. Like, it's cool to have a werewolf there, but what was he based on? What giant wolf character is there?
Lon Chaney Jr.
He's not giant. He's short for the time period.
Giant wolf characters.
I love how we're actually worried about this.
I can't think of any cultural influence aside from, hey, let's just have them in there.
Yeah, it's cool. It was the 80s. You just put a wolf on.
You know what?
Games, metal covers.
The stuff that came out in the 80s is seriously, I don't know how cocaine could have not been more evident than with some of the idea for kids shows and video games.
Ralph is the coked up werewolf.
Oh man, this is my ex-girlfriend, Lizzie. She's such a bitch. You know what? Let's make her a lizard.
She's cold. The Japanese version of Rampage had the hidden fourth character, the masturbating bear.
Oh, Jesus.
I feel like we may have drifted somewhat, but my answer is a Neo Geo.
Neo Geo.
An excellent answer.
Beautiful red cabinets.
Oh, yes.
And I did look it up. Galaga are the enemies in the game. It is not the ship.
What's the ship?
It didn't say. At least not what I was reading.
Golago.
Golago 13.
It's a Galag.
No.
It's
We're
a gulag.
The gulag. There we go. Galag Archipelago. Wasn't that a fun era in games when the games would be named after the bad guy? Like how in the original Ligar is the villain, the boss of the game,
Right.
that was just endlessly confusing to you as a child. Or was to me, anyways.
Well, yeah.
I mean,
What about Donkey Kong? I mean, there's nothing confusing about that.
Yeah, he's the little red guy.
Damn, really?
Yeah.
yeah. And then,
Which is why I don't understand why he never makes an appearance in Donkey Kong Country. It's weird.
and then, there's Kung Fu, where an entire martial art is the enemy.
I never even thought of that. Street Fighter, which has moved further and further from the streets. Final Fight, which had sequels. Saturday Night Slam Masters, which you could play any day of the week.
All
We
right.
need to get into the topic, or else I'll just do those.
Yeah.
That's all it is. All right, I'll start us off on this one. So, number 5. What arcade ports were you excited about and sorely disappointed when released for console? So, this one's pretty easy for me, and I guess part of the reason I wanted to go first on this one is because I was afraid that someone else already stole it. So this one, when we were growing up, we loved Mortal Kombat. And we experienced it in the arcades. We told ourselves it's a great fighting game, but really we're just excited about all the gore and the guts and the fatalities. And then one day, they released on console, on the Super NES and on the Sega Genesis. And I'm sure many of you know, listening to this podcast, that the Super Nintendo version had absolutely no blood because Nintendo was worried that it was going to make parents not buy it for their kids. And the Sega Genesis version was the same, except it wasn't, because all you had to do was enter a code and it would unlock blood in there. Now, regardless of which version you played, I feel that both of those ports were bad. They did not carry over well. Like the Super Nintendo one looked better, but didn't play great. And the Sega Genesis one had blood, but if you only had the 3-button Genesis controller, you couldn't do, or I mean, you could do, what was it? It was one of the kicks or one of the punches that they removed, where you had to hold back in order to do the punch high.
It was the punches,
right? And then in order to block, you had to hit the start button. And of course, you're reaching your thumb to block while trying to move or kick or do what, it was just not going to work. You had to have the 6-button controller. And, I didn't know very many people that had a 6-button controller. As a matter of fact, I knew none. So
0 or fewer.
I actually need to add to this because I have first had experience of this. Number one, you actually get really good with that 3-button controller if that's all you have to use. And secondly, that 6-button controller doesn't work very well with the first Mortal Kombat.
Well, I wouldn't know.
Well, here's the reason, because I know this, because I used to go to Walmart and buy 6-button controllers specifically for this game, and I would have to return them, thinking they were all broken.
Wait, how many 6-button controllers are we talking about, Val?
I went through 5.
Oh my
God.
Yes, I went through 2 first-party Genesis controllers, and 3 of them were third-party.
So why did you go through so many?
Valve's $300
well,
day
number one, because I was a stupid kid. But secondly, I thought something was wrong with the controllers. Like I was just getting a bad batch of controllers. But
why are you saying that you felt like you did? What was the justification for the returns?
Because it didn't make sense to me that it wouldn't work with the 6-button controller. Like, of course it's going to work. Yeah, well, it would work. It's just that the like you would hit a button that was supposed to be a punch and it would act as a block, but then it would act as a punch again. It was really weird stuff. Like, I swear this is true. But yeah, something was wrong with that game and 6-button controllers. It only worked correctly with 3-button. If you played the Sega CD version, it was perfectly fine.
And that is true. That is the one port that I think does stand up to the arcade.
I disagree with that.
The load times are horrible.
Yeah, that is true. I shouldn't say it stands up to the arcade, but it was better playing that over the SNES or Genesis versions.
Yeah, sometimes. It depended. Because you would actually have load times during the match.
I really don't remember that.
Yeah, it was really, really slow. Actually, the best port, which I'm not even sure it counts, is the old MS-DOS version. That game looks exactly like the arcade. It's like I was blown away when I first ran it on my old Windows 98 machine because it looked exactly like the arcade game. It was. I don't think
I've ever seen the MS-DOS port. I think maybe the best MK port, Game Boy. Game Boy was the best MK port.
You got us, man.
Because you could play as Goro.
Fun with us.
You could unlock Goro. No problem playing the game after that.
I mean, I simply refuse to take this seriously.
So that's my spiel on the ports that disappointed me.
To all the games that I have loved.
Who would like to go next?
Let's have Val go next.
All right, Val.
Okay, so I was actually confused by the question. Was the question a game that we were excited about and another game that we were disappointed by? Or they
a game from an arcade that you were anticipating being released on console that ended up disappointing you?
So
Okay. So I would probably say Ninja Turtles 2 for the NES because it was supposed to. Yeah, it was supposed to be the arcade. So I had the first one, and I hate that game. Like, I really, really hate that. I know a lot of people say, "Oh, it's because you watch AVGN and he rips on the game." No, I hate this game with a passion. That stupid seaweed stuff, I've never passed it. All the parts before that, like the enemies are ridiculous. You're fighting like legs on fire and bats and stupid things that aren't in the show. It's horrible. So I was looking for, because when I got the game, I used to say, "Man, why can't we play the one that we play at Peter Piper Pizza?" And one day, a friend of mine in 4th grade tells me, "Oh, they're releasing that one on Nintendo," and I was very excited about it, and I thought, "Oh my god, it's finally going to play the game!" And I rented it from what was around back then? Major Video,
Arrows Video.
Yeah. For
those you listeners not in the know, that's an erotic video store.
Yeah.
You could rent Custer's Revenge there. Leisure Suit Larry.
So I rented the game. I was excited about it because it wasn't the first one, and it kind of seemed like it was pretty close, right? I mean, come on, it was a Nintendo, it was the NES. It was never going to look like what you saw at the arcade, but it was pretty close. But at the same time, it was like, well, there's only 2 players, and Rocksteady's the size of like 3 pixels. Like
he's like the smaller squid.
Yeah,
brother.
he was smaller than the turtles. Yeah, it was. I still like the game, but it's not a very good port.
Yeah, it's because
I disagree with you because for what we had back then, I mean, granted, we had Turtles in Time shortly after that. So, they definitely should have put it obviously on the Super Nintendo, and that was, I mean, whatever rights issues they had and everything, they had Turtles in Time on the Super Nintendo. They should have done it there. But for what we had on the Nintendo, I really enjoyed it. So
I did too. Yeah, I got a lot of play out of it. So I did enjoy it at the time, but I mean, looking back, it's
Yeah, so
but
like,
did you feel disappointed on it back then?
Yeah, I was.
It had extra levels.
See, for me, I hadn't actually played the Turtles arcade when the NES game came out. And when the NES game came out, I was excited because I was like, well, I never get to play the arcade. So now I can play it on my NES, and I rented it and played the hell of it. So when I finally got around to playing the arcade, I was like, what is this shit? This isn't like the NES version.
So
it's reversed for me.
Oh, wow.
There's I'm trying to remember who it is. I think it might be Hussein, but he said now that he has a kid, he's going to raise him exclusively on Weird Al without playing him the originals, just so that like when he goes to college, he'll think he's going insane. And that's Bobby with what the shit is this? The graphics are clean, play controls responsive. No, thank you. Rocksteady's taller than me.
You mean that was April O'Neil this whole time?
I thought it was just Krang cleaned up his act a little bit.
Oh, man.
Wow.
All right, Nathaniel, what about yours?
Oh shit, mine. We already kind of Final Fight.
Oh, okay.
The home version of Final Fight on Super Nintendo, because first of all they changed names because they were squeamish. So I think Sodom became Katana.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Which I don't know why he's called Sodom to begin with. Complicated backstory, but that was just kind of lame. I think they removed the factory level entirely.
Yes.
And
the industrial level.
Yeah, and even though like Relento is a nightmare to play against, he's probably my favorite character to come out of the game.
Oh.
So that was lame. And they removed Guy, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was single player, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was single player.
Yeah, which is just
Blasphemy.
It's like if you had a Street Fighter 2 where you couldn't play against the other guy, so it was just Street Fighter 1 again.
Right.
And for me, Final Fight, when Barney is Krusty the Clown. Now, Krusty has,
Clown?
yeah, he has laryngitis and a bad back, so he won't be saying anything or doing anything. How would you like this co-op beat 'em up where you can't co-op and there's not that much to beat up?
Yeah, well, it was limited to 3 characters per screen.
Oh,
like only 3 enemies could only be on.
It's maybe the first port I've had where somebody describing the game to me would be more fun than playing the version of the game. And then he beat up a bunch of women and a corrupt cop and Andre the Giant.
It's one of those situations where, like, so back to Turtles Arcade, where of course they couldn't keep up the graphical fidelity, so they minimized it and focused on making sure the gameplay was right. While it feels like with Final Fight, the graphical fidelity, of course, is not like an arcade, but for a Super Nintendo game replicating an arcade, it looks good. It just does not play good.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it plays okay. It's a very flawed port.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it. Like it's not even. I guess it could be worse. It could be unresponsive and ugly, but truly just removed everything that made me enjoy that game. Like, cooperation and low-level swear words.
And a guy named Sodom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, "Oh my God," he says, "Oh my car."
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh yeah. Car.
That's my favorite character in any work of fiction. Such a rich interior life.
yeah, because I think that's Bread.
Is it?
Brett. It's Bread. That's what his name is, and he's very distraught. Understandably so. He had a nice car.
He also had a nice smell, judging from his name.
All right, Frank, that leaves you.
Okay, so I'm going to go the opposite route, where an arcade port was actually really good, and I'm going to go with the Super Nintendo version of MK2, because I was very behind whenever consoles came out, because my parents didn't really like me playing video games, so if I got to play anything, it was either my old school Nintendo that I got 8 years after it came out. And then I was friends with our friend Mike, and he had gotten the home port for MK2 on Super Nintendo. Actually, he got it on Genesis first, which was still really good. But the Super Nintendo port, that was the first time I felt like I was playing an arcade game. And granted, it was because of my limited experience with it, but woof, all the fatalities were intact, secret characters, the graphics were pretty good. I was very happy with that port, and we played it to death. And I got really good at MK2, and then MK3 came out, and I got good at that game. But the MK2 port for Super Nintendo, I feel, was a very strong, mostly faithful port to the arcade, minus, the limitations and the missing sound clips.
I'd like to say that port of Mortal Kombat 2 is probably the reason why my local store, Angie's, went out of business, because it caused us to stop going and playing the arcade there, and therefore we didn't help them keep their lights on, so they went out of business. All right, so picking this back up. All right, so for our next question, we're kind of all just going to answer this one. What is your take on emulation of arcade games? Feel free to start us off.
Okay, I just want to jump in really quick, because this is actually something that Val and I can bond over. What we did is I really wanted to play Aliens vs. Predator, the arcade, and I had just recently come back from a trip overseas, and I had the money to invest in a really good computer. So I asked Val, I'm like, if I buy all these parts, can you build this computer and load it with, a bunch of ROMs and stuff? And he said, yeah, of course. And he built me my first main machine, which was amazing. That was 2009, I want to say, and it was so fun being able to play all those classic games. He set it up nice. It was what program was it, Val?
The front end.
Yeah, what was the front end?
It was Maximus Arcade.
That's what it was, Maximus Arcade, and I'm totally for it, because there's so many games they never got a port, and even especially that Aliens vs. Predator, the only way it's been properly released for home is that huge Capcom arcade stick, that plug and play one, which is $150 or $200, and I don't want to buy a $200 arcade stick with limited game library. You can't load anymore. You can't take any off, just to play Aliens vs. Predator. Mm-hmm. So I'm very much for emulation.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think my take on it is really primarily the preservation of games that these game companies don't take care of anymore. I get it if they're still releasing the games regularly, Nintendo. Nintendo, when they had their store on the Wii U and on the Wii, where different companies were loading up games, and some of the reports are their arcade games. So I totally get why they want to protect themselves, and and want to make their money. But if you got games that we love from the past that they're not bothering to preserve anymore, emulation is a way for us to experience those games that have dropped off the face of the earth. So I'm totally for it as long as people aren't, pirating that stuff. But, it's always going to be considered pirating by the companies because they're going to see as a threat for them losing money. But overall, I want it. I think it's good.
It's like when YouTube load old movies, which nobody cares about, where I'm sure there is a cost holder, but they're not bothering to keep them in print. And it's like, if you can't be bothered to release it, hardly seems like I'm picking your pocket by doing this. So, yeah, I would draw the line at like current releases, actual pirating, but who am I ripping off if I play the original version of Strider?
Right.
Well, they actually do have ports for the original version of Strider.
Yeah, well, just cut that part. Yeah, I think we're all for it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it ties into what Bobby said, because it's more just the opportunity to play things you wouldn't normally be able to play, and to get these arcade experiences that you just can't get anymore. Because something that we've all kind of griped about is that modern arcades, they're just, I'm trying to think of a good explanation. It's like a hot dog covered in glitter. There's, it's shiny, but it's not a really good thing.
No, it's mostly a few shooting cabinets, one of those little basketball things, and then the Galaga Pac-Man machine.
Yeah. And just for tickets, so modern arcades, I'm not really a fan of at all. Actually, we were recently at Dave & Buster's, and we walked around for a good 15-20 minutes, and the only thing we played was Connect 4, the arcade game. And that just, I think that's just a testament to the lack of appeal for our generation, or at least for gamers like us.
So for me, I'm going to take a more personal stance on emulation. Obviously, I'm for preservation of these games that you're never really going to see ever again. But for me, emulation is kind of the way I started in working with computers. My sister moved back from Nashville when I was 18 to my parents' house. She bought a computer to work to go to college, and when she wasn't using it, we were just do whatever we want with it. Through a couple of friends of mine, I learned what emulation was. So, I started searching around. I started finding emulators. Back then, trying to get MAME was a miserable experience to actually get up and running. There was no such thing as YouTube tutorials. You had to go hunt through forums and just a lot of trial and error and a lot of running command line utilities. It was not the way it is today. So it made me build a lot of troubleshooting skills. I remember the first time I actually got a game on MAME running successfully, and it was Samurai Showdown.
Wow.
And it was the most exciting thing to see what I could only imagine just playing, on really expensive hardware on something I had at home. It was all inspiring, and I've always been in love with it. I still kind of mess with it today, but not as much as I used to. But I owe my career to emulation. This is how I got started. I'll always think MAME is probably one of, if not the best written pieces of software ever written in history.
And just to clarify for anybody who's not in the know about, what is MAME?
It's an acronym. It's Multiple Arcade Machine Emulator. So a lot of people, when you think of an emulator, you think of a console like the Nintendo or the Sega Genesis, where it just emulates the one machine and you kind of just throw ROMs at it. MAME actually is a conglomerate of different what's called drivers. So, the hardware that ran Street Fighter 2 was completely different than the hardware that ran Galaga. But MAME will actually kind of bundle up all those different systems into one interface. So it's just really a collection of all different types of arcade hardware in one program. And to me, that's kind of the most exciting thing about it, is how many different systems it actually can emulate on your PC. It's just awesome. It's incredible software.
No
Nice.
mames.
I prefer to pronounce it Mammy.
No mammy.
Mammy.
Yeah, MAME is great. MAME is an excellent piece of software. And there's lots of great emulators out there. I mean, ZSNES is probably the first one that I used back in college. But,
Actually, I think the very first one I ever used was Nesticle. It was an NES emulator. It's actually a pretty terrible emulator by today's standard play. It was actually written by the same team that wrote Doom.
Oh, wow.
Really?
Yeah, Bloodlust Software, I think they're called.
Hey, Val.
Yes.
Call me by your MAME. Leave that in.
No, please don't.
No, I probably won't.
Timothy Chalamet.
All right. So I think we're ready to move on to our final question of the evening and close this up. You guys ready?
Sure.
Yes.
All right. So our final question is, what made arcades so special? Who's going to start us off?
I'll start off because I'll probably end up commenting on everybody's anyway. For me, I don't know what it is. I have always been in love with video games as far as like my first experience with them. I remember literally going to my neighbor's house, seeing Super Mario Brothers for the very first time and being awestruck. It was amazing to me that you could control a character and, play a game virtually. And then going to the arcade was that times a million, because there's all these huge machines. You put money into them and you get to play as the character that you're seeing in the demo, or, you get to drive the car, or you get to fly the spaceship, or whatever it is. To me, it's just, even that little kid in me is still there every single time I get to see an arcade that I really enjoy, which is why I ended up buying an arcade machine, because, when you guys do come over and we get to play stuff like Street Fighter or whatever, it's just so fun because it feels like a different experience. I mean, we're playing the same game that we've always played, but the delivery method, however you want to call it, it's just better to me. I don't know. I can't really articulate it in a very clear way, but
I think that's articulate. I'm not.
Well,
no,
thank
I
you.
do. I think it's nicely put.
Agreed.
So for me, I don't know. I just love playing arcade games so much, which is why I'm so sad that they don't exist in the way that they do, at least not here. One of my dreams is to eventually go to Galloping Ghost in, Brooksfield, Illinois, where it's got like over 700 arcade machines.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. And I think that, if I'm not mistaken, you pay like $20 and it's all day play.
Oh, that's
I
awesome.
want to go to there.
We need to plan a trip.
Hell yeah.
I don't think it's too far from Chicago, where they have watery pizza.
Now you tell me.
Hopefully we can just avoid Chicago altogether.
No, that pizza was fantastic. I don't know
Okay.
what the hell he's talking about.
Maybe I just went to a bad pizza place.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, you were in Chicago.
Okay.
I have no bias. Should I go next?
Sure.
Okay. Well, I may be showing my true colors because as much as I enjoy talking about this stuff, I'm not a game level of you guys. And that maybe ties into why arcades are so special to me, because they were part of an era where my friend could come up to me and go, hey, there's a new game, Street Fighter, but there's samurais and there's a goblin with a Freddy Krueger glove. and then I would have to go check it out for myself. There's, Wolverine is fighting Akuma. Akuma being a perfect example. That sounds like something somebody would make up. There's a guy who runs out and beats up Bison, and then you have to fight him.
Well, to be fair, there were a lot of things that were just made up.
Of course. And of course, Akuma's based on the Shenlong hoax. So, but yeah, they kind of tie into that. And on a purely physical level, they were. I've always thought of arcades as casinos for children, which I think is why I like casinos now. But they were communal, hectic, kind of dark, endlessly surprising. No two ever the same. And last but not least, they were just so vastly advanced compared to the home systems. So, like any game you were going to play, the arcade version was the platonic ideal of that game. And you just made do with all the shadows darkly that you could buy at home. So, yeah, that's... they were just super fun. And, outside of specialty shops, they're never going to be quite what they were. But it was just a point in history that was kind of to be around for.
Yeah, you know what? I just want to piggyback on what you said about how no two were the same. And I really feel like that was so true because, anywhere from movie theaters to, pizza joints to corner stores to actual arcades in the mall, I don't remember ever seeing an arcade where it's like, okay, there's like 99% of the games are the same as this last place. Let's not go to that place anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere you went, there was something different, something cool to check out. Like Detour, that dollar movie theater that had that arcade. That's the first time I saw the full motion video. What was the name? Was it Time?
Oh,
what's it called?
Time Traveler.
Time Traveler. First time I'd ever seen a game like
it's
that.
people?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was set up like a hologram too.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
A fascinating abomination.
Let's see, like Aladdin's Castle, first place I had ever seen X-Men vs. Street Fighter. Putt Putt, an old mini golf place, first place I had ever seen, X-Men Children of the Atom. Just every single place that had arcades you wanted to check out. Actually, and I kind of gonna go back to this question, but growing up, as far as favorite arcade memory is my dad would bowl in a Friday night league at this place called Bowl El Paso, and I would be in the arcade, and I remember when Mortal Kombat first came out, and there were so many people, and of course I was tiny, there were so many people around the machine that I couldn't even see it. And when I finally went up and I saw people playing it, I was blown away. I was like, these graphics are amazing. Oh my God, that guy just killed that guy, And, then I remember seeing an MK machine, I think at the mall at Diamond Gym, as a matter of fact. I don't know if Diamond Gyms was already open then, but there was nobody playing it. It's just crazy how different they were.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, the experience is different because since, I've said several times now during this podcast that I didn't play a lot of arcades growing up. I had some experiences, but the thing that stands out the most to me about arcade games in general, whether it was in an arcade or just sitting at a locally owned corner store, is that there was always a community of gamers. Like Mortal Kombat 2 was me and my friends. The Kung Fu game was me and my cousins going to arcades and boomerangs, playing, Avengers and playing with 3 other people that I didn't even know, but it was playing together. And it was the same thing with Ninja Turtles and the Simpsons game and Sunset Riders, because those games were all built around multiplayer. And like my dad and I would play the Terminator 2 arcade game that our friend Gino owns. He actually has a copy, or he actually owns an stand-up arcade at T2. And my dad and I would play that forever. So there's always a sense of community. To me, that's what was important about arcades. Is you could build a sense of community around that shared love of gaming.
Oh my God, I totally agree. And you reminded me of one of my favorite arcade memories. Captain America in the Avengers game.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
With the voice acting. So
You will
great.
be the one escaping. So, my favorite thing about the voice acting is that you would constantly get assistance from tertiary Avengers who would like hop in and give you a weapon or point you the right way. And Captain America would thank them, but because the thank you would always be the same, then they would load the character's actual name, like a separate sound file. So every single time, it sounds like Captain America is just forgetting the names of his coworkers. So, they went that way. Thank you, Submariner. Thank you. And you're waiting for like, thanks, champ. Oh, thanks, big fella.
Please welcome Mr. Black.
Yeah. And you're just waiting for like Cap on the inside of his shield. It says Wonder Man equals white, Falcon equals black.
Oh man, you know what? I'll let the question finish because I want to ask one to everybody else. But go ahead and finish.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Val, I think you're the only one.
Yeah. So for me, I was growing up. I was pretty much the only boy that would join my sisters and my mom at the mall. My dad was always. Brother was, he's already middle school, high school. He was too cool to go to the mall with us. So while they were off shopping, doing girl things, I was kind of just stuck on my own to do my own thing. And my mom would throw me a couple bucks to go hang out at Aladdin's Castle. And I would spend the whole trip at the arcade. I had nothing else to do. So even without money, I would just stare at the track screens for Shadow Dancer and Aliens, King of the Monsters. I would watch, other guys play the fighting games, and I remember the loud sounds of like the elephants in Dhalsim stage and Street Fighter. There was just this ambiance of a really loud arcade smell to it. There was that ugly like carpet, like that that. No, I'm talking about that glow in the dark carpet that every arcade had, with the TV screens playing MTV videos. It was amazing to see like the technology that was like back then. You would judge, what was the best console by which one had the best? Yeah, which one had the best port of Street Fighter or whatever arcade game was out at the time. There was just something. It was like you're looking at like the best in high tech entertainment you could find anywhere, and you don't see that anymore. I remember the last time. One of the times that I realized that the arcades were dead is when I saw the home of Soul Calibur on the Dreamcast, because it looked exactly like the arcade. And I thought to myself, why would I ever go to the arcade now? Just play it at home. It's exactly.
That's yeah.
Yep.
That. I remember that pivotal turning point when the arcade was no longer the innovator. I missed that, and there was just an excitement, and it was a little scary to go to the arcade too. And you'd have to play some kid who's going to kick your ass.
Yes.
And there was no way to avoid it because you're going to hog the machine yourself. So
yeah, I do have fond memories playing Capcom K2, playing with Dan Hibiki for a little while. But if you think people get pissed off wasting, that's the cherry on top.
Oh man, you know what? Kind of like what you're saying, Val, about being afraid of getting your ass kicked and stuff like that, by people. Did any of you guys have like a bad experience in an arcade?
Yes.
And I don't even mean just related to the games in general, but just being there, because there were a couple times that I was like bullied, and there was one time actually, it sticks out of my mind. I swear I remember it like it happened yesterday, but my dad had to go in for a bowling meeting one time at El Paso, and I was so happy because there was nobody in the arcade. and I wanted to play Ninja Turtles. I run over there, I put my dollar in the machine, and there's this old guy. I'd say, probably in his like late 30s, early 40s. And he was playing, out of all the machines, he's playing Ninja Turtles, which is what I wanted to play. And he was playing as my favorite character, Donatello. So I'm patiently waiting for him to die because he sucked. And he dies at Rocksteady. Well, as soon as he dies, and it says the continue screen, I put my quarter in because he backed off a little bit, and I start playing, and he pushes me out of the way, and I was like kind of looking at him, kind of surprised, and I try to grab the controller again, and he tells me, he's like, "Move back, boy," and I was like, "I just put my quarter in." And he's like, "No, you didn't," and I was so pissed. I was so pissed because I'm like, I was right in front of you. I literally put my quarter in, and this asshole with his son, who's not even playing, he had his son next to him who wasn't even playing, pushes me out of the way to steal my quarter to play Ninja Turtles and fucking lose.
Yeah, didn't even do it for a victory. Just kept sucking.
I was, you know what? And that's one of the first times that I realized that adults are full of shit.
Oh, heavens, yes.
I have a feeling this question is going to bring up a lot of rage-inducing memories.
Well, I don't know. I once got into an unrelated fight with Piper Pizza, but that was merely adjacent to arcade games caused by them. I did once get so mad at machine that I did not set out to do this, but it's just kind of a like, oh gosh darn it sort of physical reaction. I kicked out the front of the stand, not the screen, but like the podium that holds up the controls, which was fortunately cheaply replaced, but it was just a real moment of that's the closest I ever came to a real tilt in my life. So all of mine are just Warren Zevon boy attacks.
So,
what about you,
so mine, we used to, a friend of mine, Danny Acosta, he was a neighbor down the street. We used to go to Pistol Pizza all the time. And we would always try to con the arcade operators into giving us free credits for games. And usually what we would do, we would just tell them, hey, this game over here took my token and it didn't give me my credit. And pretty much every time the operator would just kind of roll his eyes and just give us a token. So we would do this all the time. And then I tried to play this con on this terrible, stupid game called Ninja Clown.
What?
Ninja Clowns. It's this piece of shit, like side-scrolling beat 'em up where you're a clown and you fight other clowns. It sucks. It's a stupid, shitty game.
Never heard of that.
And go look it up.
It was Shakey's.
Yeah. And that's the game I decided to tell the operator that stole my quarter. So I went to him because I wanted to play Street Fighter. I went to him and I told him, hey, it looks like took my token and I just want to see if I could get it back. He's like, is that true? Let's go take a look. I thought, oh shit. So he goes to the machine, dunks a token into Ninja Clowns, and it starts right up. He's like, nope, looks okay to me. And I had to play Ninja Clowns. instead of Street Fighter. So
your bad experience is that you had to play a shitty game.
You don't understand. Until he called my bluff, I thought I was in deep shit. Like I thought he was going like check the machine and audit it and made sure that there was a token thrown in there. And if I was lying, he was going to kick me out and never let me back in. So I was shaking, terrified. Like thinking like, oh man, I'm never going to come back here.
Oh, okay. So it was the terror lead up to, it was the anticipation.
Well, I did mention I had to play Ninja Clowns.
What are you talking about? This game looks amazing.
No, it does not. You must have clicked on the wrong link.
Ninja Clown Arcade. No.
No, I'm looking at it. I think it had Dawn Bluth animation. This is
No.
Wow. Video game by Strata. You know, Strata, that very well-known video game company.
Yeah, I think it was a joint venture between Konami and Capcom. The best of both development teams. Don't know what you're complaining about, Val.
Yeah, that game looks pretty bad. What about you, Bobby?
To be honest, I can't. Actually, you know what? One just popped in my head, and it wasn't terrible. But going back to the memory I shared about my first arcade experience, about being in the meat market and or my uncle's meat market and playing the kung fu game. One of the times I kept losing to my cousin, and I got angry, and we got into a shoving match over it. It's like, I can't remember what I said to him, but whatever I said to him pissed him off, and like he bumped his shoulder into me while we're fighting, so of course it caused me to miss a hit on him, and I ended up losing the match. And I was like, "You did that on purpose!" And I pushed him, and then we just started pushing each other back and forth. And of course, my uncle got mad at us, and he said, "Hey, take that shit outside!" This is literally what he said. And so I couldn't play arcades anymore that day. I had to go outside and play in the freaking desert of the rocky parking lot he had. And that sucked. That's probably the worst thing that happened. I haven't had much worse happen in an arcade, fortunately.
You know what? And you've never talked about this cousin, so obviously it had a profound effect on you.
I don't talk about this cousin because I don't talk about any of my cousins.
You're ruining this, Bobby.
Or making it better.
Yeah. Oh, man. That guy, I'm telling you, that guy made me so mad. So mad.
Seems like you're hanging on to it.
Yeah, you know what? If I were to ever know, you know what? It got so bad that I imagined him telling stories to his friends about this crazy kid, like when he's like sitting around with his buddies drinking, like some kid tried to get in front of me when I was playing Ninja Turtles. You know, like that's how obsessed I was with it. Like that day.
That's good.
Oh my god.
What would you do if you saw this guy ever again?
You know what? I would literally just call him out and be like, "You stole a quarter from me and you couldn't even play the fucking Ninja Turtles game. You are a piece of shit asshole." And of course, he wouldn't know what I was talking about because he'd be old as hell now. And I would there'd be no catharsis. I know. He would not know. He would, and even if you were to remember, he would say that I was just some dumb kid.
Frank, I think it would work, but you have to say it with the Inigo.
I'd have to say it with what?
The Inigo Montoya accent.
You stole my quarter. Prepare to die.
Stop saying that.
My name is Frank Senna. You stole my quarter. Prepare to die.
Well, gentlemen, I'd like to tell you thank you for coming in tonight and recording this podcast. It was quite a deal of fun.
All right. Well,
It was.
thank you guys so much for having me on as a guest. If you liked my portion of this, I have my tabletop role-playing game podcast, the Pretendium Compendium, which I host with my friend Randy. She does most of the heavy lifting. But yeah, you can catch us there every Monday. It's fun to say, hard to spell, but Pretendium Compendium. It's kind of D&D, but we use that as a jumping point to talk about just fantasy genre stuff in general. So I don't know. Hopefully there's a lateral move between audiences there. But yeah, I love the podcast, and thank you guys so much for having me on.
Well, thanks
for coming on, man.
Likewise.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening today on this podcast. It was quite enjoyable for us. The arcade thing was obviously a big part of our lives growing up, and it will continue being part of our lives moving forward, as evidenced by Frank owning one, Val owning one. We talked about Gino. He owns two, and I eventually will be owning one. And obviously Nathaniel has shared his optimism for eventually owning that red Neo Geo arcade. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you guys next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
So did our discussion make you long for those days of yore? Did it make you wish that you were old enough to have partaken in the quarter munching pastime? Or is the feeling of nostalgia merely a memory of something we no longer have, something that cannot ever be replicated? Regardless, we hope you enjoyed the tales we shared. Arcades as we remember them may no longer exist, but that's what makes fleeting things so special, that they end. If arcades today were like the arcades we remember through rose-tinted glasses, then we probably would not be having this podcast today. Certainly not in the way we discussed it, and I doubt with the same amount of emotional attachment. We know this, and this is why we focus so much on sharing the things we love rather than bemoaning the way things have changed. Life is change. This COVID-19 pandemic has changed the way we live, yet we have still found a way to keep in touch and share our stories. And the reality is, even as stay-at-home orders are lifted, life will never be what it was before the pandemic. The sooner you can embrace or at least come to terms with that notion, the sooner you can focus on the things that make you smile. And we hope that this podcast is one of them. Before I check out, a loud shout out to our friend Nathaniel, who joined us in this episode, and Randy and their podcast, The Pretendian Compendium. If you like the world of Dungeons & Dragons, whether it be tabletop, books, video games, movies, etc., it'll probably be discussed. Please check out the link in the description. We'll be back in 2 weeks with an episode on everyone's favorite game, except for the ending, Mass Effect. Thank you for joining us. Be safe and take care. Peace.